All right. So, what do you know? It is already November 3rd. Um, I wanted to sort of talk about everything that's happened ever since Ruth Bader Ginsburg passed away. So, it's been a while, and stuff has kind of gotten in the way. And I actually got sick with, like, maybe COVID, maybe not. Um, we'll see, I guess. Um, but it's November 3rd, it's election day, and I guess I just want to do an addendum because despite this not being like a big platform or anything, and it's not like I have like a big reach or anything, I um, don't want to take down my last video because I put work into it, and I believe a lot of what I said there is still true and applies to the time it was made. Um, but things are different now, and I want to talk about it. So, the last thing I made was in late June. I think it might have been July 1st. And it was basically me making the case that voting for Joe Biden is a waste of time, and that ultimately the Democrats are serving a worse role than the Republicans in our democracy. And I believe that still generally to be true. But there's been sort of a change since then. And that is that Trump has sort of gotten worse. And I don't say that lightly. I don't say that to save face. I don't say that like I don't think that I missed like signs before. I know that he was being very concerning, especially since his Mount Rushmore speech during the George Floyd protests, where he kind of made the case that we have Americans and then we have protesters, and the protesters are, the opposite of American, which very much implies that there's something that needs to be done to stop protesting in order to save the integrity of America. Totally not fash at all. But so that was very concerning. Don't get me wrong, that when that came out, which was after I had finished the work on the video, I was terrified by that. But I want to say that some of the recent stories have kind of been even more mask off, in my opinion. So, for example, we had the story of him during, I believe it was the first presidential debate. He was asked to condemn white supremacy. Now, let's compare this to what he did in 2016. Maybe I'll put video clips in, but since it's November 3rd now, I probably won't. But in 2016, he was asked to disavow the endorsement of David Duke, who's like a known white supremacist in American discourse. And he didn't do it. But the way that he didn't do it, I argue, is different than what he did in this debate. So in 2016, he basically said, look, I don't really know about them, so I'm not going to disavow something I don't know about, which is slimy and awful. And basically what I believe he was trying to do is, because of course he knows what the fucking KKK is, and he knows what white supremacy is, like anybody does. At that time, I would say that he didn't want to lose any support that he had, because like he valued the approval of anybody, and he thinks that alienating a segment of the far right is alienating part of his base, and electorally he's right. But in this debate this year in 2020, he was asked by Chris Wallace to condemn the Proud Boys and white supremacists and fascists, and he responded addressing the Proud Boys, stand back and stand by, which alone is one thing. Okay, alone there are ways that are plausible to be like, oh, he like misspoke, he actually just meant stand down, like don't do these things, like I don't, whatever. But when you combine that with the rhetoric I just mentioned before, like in the Mount Rushmore speech, where he kind of talked about how you have Americans and then you have protesters, the way that he kind of glossed over the Kyle Rittenhouse shooting, the way that he also has been encouraging some very scary behavior by Trump supporters against the Biden campaign. So you had that viral video on Twitter. I'll try to link it like down in the description, but like there was like a convoy of Trump supporters following a Biden-Harris bus. And they were like ramming cars off the road, and they were trying to run the Biden campaign out of Texas, and they got them to cancel an event, right? And Trump sees this. So we knew that fascists and like, crazy, awful people, like modern day fucking brown shirts, are emboldened by Trump. We knew that. But more and more, he has been encouraging them. And he tweeted out this video and he said, "I love Texas." And in a in a rally later on, he like sarcastically referred to this convoy of people around the bus as, "Oh, they were just protecting the bus. Isn't that nice?" When, of course, what he is doing is he's kind of like dismissing this sort of behavior of his supporters while also on Twitter, like broadcasting his support for it. So you combine that with the anti-protester sort of divisive rhetoric and the line where he says to like stand back and stand by to the Proud Boys, and this idea of like the Trump poll watcher. He wants Trump supporters to go out and watch polls, which does not sound very democratic to me. Excuse me. Like, he's a fascist, and I knew that if you had asked me when I uploaded the last thing, if you had asked me, is Trump a fascist? And I alluded to him sort of being a part of the fascist movement towards the end of it, I would have said he is a proto-fascist. He wants to cling to his own power, and he does that sort of by any means necessary, and he's willing to sort of like abide by the fascist tendencies in the growing far right in the United States. That would have been my answer then. And I don't think that I was wrong. I think that I was working with the information that was in front of me. Now, I believe, yes, he is a modern day fascist. I believe that if he is allowed to stay in power, electorally, I believe that he will seek to keep the power. And I'm not one to be alarmist about this kind of thing. And I think that there used to be a case to be made that Trump was just kind of a Republican, like he was just kind of a run-of-the-mill, like conservative Republican. I don't think that's true anymore. I genuinely believe that my interpretation of the previous facts ended up panning out to be incorrect. And because of that, I voted for Joe Biden. I'm in a state that could go for Joe Biden, and I voted for Joe Biden. And I stand by everything I said in the last video. And if the election had been in July, I would not have voted for Joe Biden. And I believe that still that Joe Biden will enable fascism. I believe that liberalism will enable fascism. I believe there will be a second Trump. I believe if Biden wins, there will be a second Trump. I believe that the Republican Party is not coming back from this. I think they are going to continue down this road as time goes on. And I still believe that the only way to effectively oppose this in not even the long run, but even in the short run past like the next 24 hours is leftist action. And because of that, I really hope there is never another situation like this, because this is almost like, it's almost like taking a morphine shot, like a single morphine shot, to stop pain that is going to return. Like, Biden does not stop Trump. Biden does not stop so-called Trumpism. I hate this word, but he does not stop the rise of fascism. He will not. He is the last minute, like, okay, we got to get Trump out really fast and figure out what the fuck we're going to do. Because come 2024, if it even takes that long, it might even be like if Biden is announced to have won the election, we might see some armed like resistance from people, like on a scale that's not insignificant. I don't know what's going to happen, but I voted for Joe Biden. I'm not walking back anything that I said, and I'm keeping the last video up because I agree with everything that my past self said in that video, and my critique of the Democratic Party remains the same. My analysis of Trump at the time remains the same, but it got worse, and I am sorry that I was unable to see that back then. So that's my update. I hope Joe Biden wins tonight. I'm not excited for him. I think he's going to be terrible, and I think that fascism is not going away if Joe Biden gets in the White House, and I think that the only way it can go away is by growing a leftist movement. And I just want to say that I mentioned at the end of the last video that the growth, I called the Democratic Party the greater of two evils, and I think on a party level, I still think that's true. And the reason that I said that was that I think that the growth of a leftist movement, which in my view is the only way to effectively oppose fascism, I believe that the Democrats actually make that impossible. So with the election of Joe Biden, I think that it will be harder actually to grow leftism. I genuinely believe that. And it is a bleak situation, because that means that the prospect of actually stopping fascism is very low. It looks low, and that's not good. But the facts are here, and here we are. So that's my update. That's where I am. I know that I'm only really talking sort of to a group of friends and people that I know. So I know that this isn't like reaching a wider audience of people. And I feel like if it was, like, if I had that, like any kind of reach at all, like I would have probably done this a little bit sooner. But that's kind of where I am. Those are my thoughts. And I, much as I hate the liberal order and the liberal system and all of that, we're not ready for that collapse. Like, the left is not ready for that. We don't have the weaponry. We don't have the assets. We don't have even the theoretical backing in the United States to withstand a collapse of this republic right now. So here we are. Thank you for listening.